We always say we need to be like attorneys and start charging by the hour for these. Then we'll be first every time.
It's true. Now we gotta get them out of here.
Or they'll just be like, we don't need one this year. Like,
It was sent out hopefully as an attachment. If not, I can pull it right up.
It would have been when you went out there, it might have gone out there.
Well, I know I sent it to you that, but that wasn't,
There he is.
I have it. When we get there.
Yeah, you can pull it up.
Yeah.
Mr. Carl.
all right, well, she'll pull it up and then we'll.
All right. We'll go into time counts, all right?
This could be here.
It could be. I want Michael to sit down and do it. Do it.
All right, so we got that report.
Yep. Stay warm, all right. All right, Michael, get it started here. All right, I'd like to call to order this meeting tonight, the joint North Public Utilities Board of Commissioners and Sewer Authority for Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. As always, we're joined by folks telephonically and also by, is this Zoom? Or is
This is Teams.
this is Teams, I'm sorry, Teams. So I'd ask all those who are joining by phone or by Teams to mute your device when you're not speaking, and when you do speak, please announce your name for clarity of the record. Move on to agenda item 2, which is a 15-minute public comment period. Are there any members of the public this evening that would like to speak?
I don't see any.
Don't have anybody on? All right, if anyone shows up later, we can reopen agenda item 2. Moving on to agenda item 3, approval of the minutes of the January 23rd meeting, which is in your board package. As people have had a chance to read and review that, I will entertain a motion to approve. I have a first and a second, thank you. All right, is there any questions or comments concerning the minutes? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Are there any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 4, which is the information and updates provided in the board package. The first one is the financial update. Were there any questions or comments on the financial update? All right. Next is the leadership team template. Were there any questions? Go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry. I'm going too fast.
I noticed that cash was down and receivables were up relative to a year ago. And so is it because we're having more delinquencies or late payers now?
The big driver is the sewer plant.
Is what?
Sewer plant, and
The sewer plant.
yeah, we're starting to have a lot of money there.
$6.5 million the state owes us. $6.5 million the state owes us.
Yeah, so that's why the cash
That's
is down.
what- Yep.
So it's not really a factor of people not paying their.
Right.
It's tiny, Mike.
It's tiny.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
So, the second of the month, we'll be able to submit for payment, and then that'll be the first payment we get since we've closed the loan on the sewer plant.
I have sort of a financial question. I don't know if it's appropriate for this, but I've sent you and I've seen on the Norwich community that some complaints about skyrocketing electric bills over the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And when we approved the rate structure starting in November, our internal costs, which we control, went up. And our purchase power costs went down, which we don't really control. But since then, for example, natural gas has plummeted in terms of cost even further. I guess my question is, now that we're 3 months into it, what do the electric bills look like? Are they up, are they down? Are they...
We're gonna have in a presentation that will show where we are. And we haven't changed purchase power adjustment. And so bills are still significantly lower. And if you look year over year, very, very
I mean, that would be my expectation. I don't know why there's a,
Well, there's a couple things. One, it's been reported in a day, clearly and accurately, that nearly every NFU customer's bill would go down with the November rate. We were clear about that. It was
Yeah.
reported accurately. We provided links on our social media page to the information that gave a summary of the budget that explained exactly how much people's bills were going to cut
Yeah.
down. Repeated, we put it in our newsletter at the end of the year with information. I mean, we've done everything we can to explain it.
Yeah.
One or two anonymous folks shouldn't be driving the conversation at the board meeting. It's been one or two versus 39,000 people that don't say anything.
I'm not suggesting it's driving the conversation. I'm just asking what the bills are like
Oh, yeah.
in reality versus what we wanted to do.
And then, you know, Steve will go into that when he does his presentation and also go into what the next months are going to lead to, and with potential increases in Eversource UI. And we have an increase that's coming in September or November.
We also spoke with the day about this because they're writing a comparative article. Brian Conbeck, I think his name is. I talked to him last week, and he'll have the story in the next 3 or 4 days that positions us favorably in comparison to UI.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Robert. Very good. That was for the team template. Are there any additional questions or comments on the leadership team template? All right. We have the budget schedule was provided, I believe, and if there are any questions or comments on the budget schedule.
The only unknown is the city council presentation, and that's usually the first week of April.
Is that,
Right now, it's TBD.
does that coincide with the city council meeting, or is it like earlier in the day or
What
day?
they typically will do 3 or 4 meetings a week, so they get all of the different departments in a week. 2 weeks span.
Really?
It'll be
Yeah.
at night.
Is that,
It'll be at night.
okay, but it'll be more than one day, you think?
Oh, yeah, one for us, but it'll be, there's different, they'll do
One
public,
for us.
they'll public
Okay,
works, and
I'm
they'll do
sorry.
the Otis Library, and they'll do the rec department, and they'll do the police department, so board of ed, so they all go different nights, and we tend to be one of the bigger ones, so we usually are a headliner on, as the last presentation on one of those early evenings.
Good.
We should have our date next week.
Good. All right. That'll get transmitted to the board, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Sure. All right. Okay, if there's no questions or comments on the budget schedule, we'll move on to agenda item 5. And we'll lead off with the CMEC update, which is myself. So, the CMEC board met twice, first on January 25th and then on February 22nd since our last reporting. To close out the year, the rate 9 power cost with member return was $117 per megawatt hour, which is 2% below the budget. The member power cost with member return deviation to benchmark, aka Eversource, was a negative 41%. In that case, negative is good. That means less, which was 116% better than the budget. And 41% deviation is the largest in recent memory, if not ever. Certainly in my time there. For February, the Henry Hub price was $3.27 per decatherm, which is 43 cents lower than budget. The member residual energy cost for February was budgeted $93 and change. The actuals came in at about $81 and the LMPs were roughly $74. As we previously discussed, the LMP price has been lower than our hedge price for several months, which prompted the Mecca, David Silverstone, to raise a question concerning cost advantage with the hedge strategy policy and whether it should be modified to target closer to the LMP. Mike Sear, the energy portfolio manager, explained that the current hedge policy provides all the flexibility he needs to adequately manage the hedge, and that targeting to always beat the LMP is very risky. It can easily lead to calamity with an unexpected cold snap or unexpected world events that are largely out of our control. The goal of the hedge is to avoid market volatility pricing, and if it results in beating the LMP, that's even better, but that's not the singular goal. Also, the forward capacity auction clearing price remained at roughly $2 per kilowatt hour. For projects, as we discussed last month, the sub-base fuel cell is at full capacity and our underperformance stipend is stopped. Thereby, the project has returned to the budgeted loss predicted to be over $1 million this year. When we combine with the solar garden, the loss is predicted to be over $2 million this year and for years to come. CMEC announced that Electric Boat had signed a special contract with Groton Utilities to supply electric power. Electric Boat is a large user of electricity, however, no capacity details were provided, so stay tuned to that. David Ecclestone, the Norwich Municipal Representative, was reappointed to a 2-year term by the City Council last week. And lastly, the Norwich Personnel Committee assignments for 2024 are Chris Rose, Government and Risk Committees and Chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee. Bob Staley, Governance, Budget and Finance and Audit Committees. Myself as the Chairman of the Audit Committee. Dave Eggleston and Risk, Budget and Finance Committee. Risk, Budget, Finance and Audit Committee. And our own Chris Riley on the Legislative and Government Affairs Committee. And that's all I have. Are there any questions or comments on the CMEC report? CMEC update?
One thing, when they talk about the fuel cell and they talk about the solar gardens, it's described as a loss, but it's really paying a premium for carbon-free green energy. So you can look at it 2 different ways. We are probably paying more than we should, but it is also for a premium product.
True. It is true. But hopefully someday we might be able to get a better PPA, or I think in the case of the sub-base fuel cell, it was the gas cost.
It's the gas cost,
Gas cost, yeah.
Well, unfortunately, the solar installations suffer from less than arm's length transactions back when running CMAC. And I don't know how much difference that would have made, but there's little or no guarantees in terms of price. So, and I don't know where we haven't negotiated.
No, we did not. We are doing final settlement with Tesla, and that loss should go down after that.
Yeah.
So that might be, I'm not sure if we'll break even, but we'll get a lot closer.
It's a non-interested bargain.
Yes.
So it's very hard to make them want to have, essentially better performance.
CMEC has been talking about other solar projects and battery projects, and trust that going forward that we'll do a much better job of negotiating costs and fees and whatnot.
Good lessons learned from those projects.
All right, moving on to the financial and audit update. That's Laura. So kind.
Laura, can you give us a high-level overview of our process and then introduce our audit team?
So, quick question, finance and audit update, is that our update for our finance and audit committee? Before we-
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure that
okay.
I run appropriate.
Yeah, so this is
what
actually-
to do next.
Yeah, all right. So I'm sorry, actually should be Mike. Right, because we had 2 finance and audit meetings since our last board.
So Laura,
And then we'll put Mike Laura back in.
We had a bunch of presentations on the drivers, for various departments. It was very interesting. And I'm sorry, I don't have a recap of each individual one. They were nice presentations.
And so they're all going to be put together next month, and we'll present the entire budget next month's meeting.
Okay, that'd be great.
But at least there's some understanding, and then those presentations were also forwarded to the group, so everybody had an opportunity, if they were not attending the meetings, to take a look at the material presented.
all right, very well. And the NPU audit, I believe, is complete, financial audit, and I believe we have a presentation this evening by the auditor.
Laura, that's what I want, Laura to kick off. Yes.
So fiscal year 23 ended in June of last year, and we spent the months of July and August putting everything together, closing out our books and finalizing all of our information, and working with the auditors on some pre-audit information in May and June, and then providing them with all the documentation that they need to audit all of our books and our accounts, putting together our audited financial statements as part of the City of Norwich comprehensive audit. So Dave Flint here is the audit manager, the partner for that team, and then his team, Dave Hansen, and then several other members who are here on site for a couple of days and over to the city for probably, 2 weeks, give or take. So
2 weeks.
we go through everything with them, and then he's here to present tonight the actual financial statements. We did have hard copies in front of each of you. And I'll give you a quick introduction. I don't know if you've met everybody on the board. So our board chair is Stu Field. And then 2 seats over, Bob Staley, right next to him, Michael Black. And Dave Lynn, so the floor is yours. You want to walk us through the financial statement?
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity, guys. As Laura said, my name is David Flint. I'm a partner with CLA. Ron Nozick, hopefully you guys all remember, gave his presentation in the past. He retired as of 12/31. He's skiing in Breckenridge right now, so he's enjoying that retirement. But I actually did do this audit from 2008 to approximately 2015. So it wasn't just stepping in completely blind. So if everyone could just first turn to the audited financial statements, flip to page 1. This is our independent auditor's report. You'll see right off the bat our opinion, unmodified opinion, which of course is the best opinion that can be received. 2 things to note. You'll see an emphasis of matter paragraph. There's 2 of them this year. The first just stating that these are strictly financial statements for the department, not a reflection of the entire city. But the second one is new for this year, just indicating that we did implement a new accounting standard this year, GASB statement number 96. This is kind of like a piggyback statement off of the lease standard that we implemented last year. So last year was leases. This year it's subscription-based information technology arrangements, commonly referred to as SBITAs, but basically it's software subscriptions that have contracts greater than 1 year. We're bringing those liabilities onto the books. And I'll show you how that changed the financial statements in a little bit. So skipping ahead to page 4, this is your statement of net position, more commonly referred to as your balance sheet. You'll see that at fiscal year end, there was $64.5 million of cash. Other big items here, you'll see capital assets, $157.86 million. This, of course, is net of accumulated depreciation. Down the liabilities section, the largest item in here, of course, is cash advances from other funds. This is the amount due to the city for bonds that the city took out on MP's behalf. And of course, 2022, the city took out a $145 million pension obligation bond, which is why this number is as large as it is today. Also included in there is your net pension liability of $15.2 million and your OPEB liabilities of $7.1 million. You see how large those liabilities get. And that brings us down to net position. Net investment of capital assets, $131.1 million. Basically, this is your total capital assets, as mentioned before, less any debt used to acquire those capital assets. You see a total of $157 million of capital assets. Your net investment is 131, which is pretty good. It shows you that there's not a lot of debt outstanding for the capital assets that are currently on the books. We have a small restricted net position, which is CMAX Energy and Load Conservation Fund, only $357,000. And then all the remaining is thrown into the unrestricted category, which is a $6.8 million deficit. The next page is your statement of activities, more commonly referred to as your income statement. Obviously, right off the top, charges for service, $108.6 million. This is up $12 million over fiscal year 22, which was 96.3% in that year. At a super high level, consumption and rates were relatively consistent. The biggest changes there were increases in purchase price adjustments for electric and gas. Operating expenses year over year were up around 3.7%, which is relatively consistent with inflation. So basically, that brings us down to operating income of $8.1 million, which is great. It's up $8.5 million over fiscal year 22. Non-operating section, we have interest expense in here, which is up significantly year over year. Of course, the addition of those pension obligation bonds is a big factor here. Then, of course, we have your below the line items, we have capital contributions of $1.2 million and transfers to the city of Norwich of $8.5 million. That brings us down to a total change in that position of a $1.5 million loss. I know we are showing a loss there, but I think it's important to note that within that loss, we have $8.6 million transferred to the city, $8.5 million of pension expense, and $1.2 million of OPEB expense. Moving forward to page 11, I'll go through some of the notes. This is your capital asset footnote. You'll see at the bottom of page 11, the biggest thing here is obviously construction process. Everything flows through here. The biggest changes in here were clean water fund and drinking water fund projects that were closed and moved down into capital assets that were being depreciated. This footnote continues on to the next page, and you'll see right to use lease assets and the related accumulated depreciation. Next page. Yeah, next page, please. Nope, one back. Sorry. Yep. So you'll see right to use leased assets. So that was the standard we implemented last year. So all the leasing activity gets brought on the books, liability associated with that, as well as the asset, the right to use asset that's associated with those leased assets. So we have $881,000 of leased assets, and we have $640,000 of submitted assets. That's a new standard this year. So that's your software subscriptions. The next page, note 5, is your long-term debt. Of course, the department does not have any bonds. Of course, that's handled through the city, but you will see the cash advances there for any balance of $63.5 million. You also see state of Connecticut serial notes. Those are your clean water funds and your drinking water fund, no payables. The other big items here are your net OPEB liabilities, $7 million, your net pension liability, $15.2 million. So a little bit more on the pension, page 15, you'll see that the pension plan for the city, that you guys are in is 88.58% funded. This is a great funding ratio. Typically around 80% is what we say is a good funding ratio. You guys are significantly higher than that. Why?
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Is that 88.58% the actual funding of the pension fund, or does it also include the money that was borrowed as part of
The money that was borrowed was put into the pension to get to that number.
Okay.
This pension was underfunded,
Yes.
which obviously was the reason for those bonds. So 88.58%, really good funding ratio. For the fiscal year, that plan received 8.86% return on its investments, and 100% of the contribution that the actuaries determined was put into the plan, which is great. Skipping ahead to page 17, this is the OPEB plan. You'll see that the OPEB plan is 24.46% funded. This is on page 17.
It says I'm on 17, but I don't think.
17 page number, see the bottom, so this is 14.
Sorry about
Sorry, it's probably PDF 20-ish or something.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, the top, but I think you might be one too far. Yeah, one more up. Yeah, so you see that the OPEB plan is 24.46% funded. Obviously, this is a relatively low funding ratio. Admittedly, across the state, a lot of municipalities in their OPEB plans, they're not even funded at all. There's no funds set aside, and they're just paying these costs as they go. So there is, you'll see, there is $2.3 million of investments set aside for a total liability of $9.3 million.
How do you determine the liability?
Your actuary determines that based on participants, their hire dates, obviously their life expectancy.
So it's based on like national statistics, basically?
Yeah.
If you have X number of people working for you, making X number of dollars, they come up with a number and they reach.
Yeah, I mean, yes, for the pension, obviously what they make is a big factor with this. This is more just benefits. I don't necessarily think your salary comes into play, but that's definitely outside of mine.
So you may not have this in your back pocket, but do you know what the discount rate is that they're currently using to?
I do, No, it's certainly in the sixes, so a big trend statewide has been decreasing that discount rate. They were as high as in the sevens. I think we realized that that was probably too aggressive, and everyone's been moving them down about 0.1% each year. And you'd be amazed at how large of an impact just a 0.1% has on that funding ratio.
It kind of sounds backwards, but the lower the discount rate goes, the higher the liabilities go.
Yeah, because you're assuming that your investments are going to have lower returns
Yes.
over the so it looks like we have 6.25% for the pension.
That's all right,
You probably don't have this. This is the 170-page report that we do for the whole town, but this is available on the website. But they're both in that range for the two plans. And again, so the OPEB plan had a 10.27% return for the year. And again, 100%. So yes, it is underfunded, but 100% of what your actuary told you guys to put in was put in. So that's great. All right, so page 23, just talking about those two standards. So the leases and the SPITA is not necessarily material when you're looking at how big the pension and the OPEB liabilities are, but this was a big lift for your team to implement these two standards. So I just wanted to touch on base real quick. So you see, lessee agreements where you're leasing property. There's $507,000 of lease liabilities. You can see how much we paid each year, and that's a total of $578,000 in property leased. You also have lesser arrangements. You're renting out property, and you'll see at the top of the next page, there's a total of $544,000 of revenue that will be received from those lessor arrangements. And then C there is your new standard GASB number 96 SBITA agreements. We have a total liability of $157,000 associated with those software contracts that we are entered into, and then we have capital assets associated with those of $467,000. That is the MPU financial statements. Do you guys want me to quick go over the federal and state single audits?
I would like to get your opinion on the strengths relative to other utilities in the financials or weaknesses, if you have any comments to make on that.
Well,
I'm a CPA, I don't want to be a pain in the neck.
No. It's a great question,
But I
and
have to say, I became a CPA in 1976, and I'm not an auditor, so,
yeah, sure.
this isn't my stocking cup right now.
No, I understand. You're a municipal utility department, right? And your number one priority, at least my understanding, is to serve the citizens of Norwich, right? So from that aspect, you're setting the rates as low as you can, right, to get by, as opposed to a utility company who is doing exactly the opposite, right? So from that standpoint, I think that the financial statements are strong, right? Like I mentioned, we had a $1.5 million loss for the year, but that included $8.5 million that was given back to the city. And that also included some significant costs associated with the pension OPEB plan. So I do think that it is strong from what you guys are trying to accomplish. And that's my opinion.
We're heading into like a $200 million building project, sewer.
Yep.
And it kind of worries me that, we're showing a loss and we're heading into a $200 million, transaction. And, it's probably, the financing is in place, I assume.
Yes.
Are you comfortable with, we'll be able to cash flow through this thing?
We have rates in place to cover that, Mike. For this year, we're going to be doing rate adjustments every fall until we get stabilized and we know exactly what our spend will be each year.
And I think our rate structure, yes, we want to keep it, as reasonable as possible, but I think Norwich Public Utilities has always put a premium on service and reliability. of our systems for customers. And, you know, the feedback I get is people that aren't in our area wish they were. And you know, we get a lot of national awards because we do a good job that way. So, you know, I think we're doing very well myself. You know, I'm glad you're satisfied with it. You know, I just hope with this major undertaking that it all works out. Probably will. It should.
You know, Mike, I think on the sewer side of it, the bad news is we've got close to 100% increase in rates over the next 8 years. Good news is the sewer charge is not that much. So, I mean, we're gonna have to charge more, but it's not gonna bankrupt people,
That is good.
hopefully.
Yeah, it's difficult when less than half of your customer base is a sewer customer.
Yeah.
It's much easier to do increases in electric where there's a much larger pool to spread it over.
The thing is, the sewer is paid for by only the sewer customers too. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes. No city tax,
What percentage of our ratepayers have the sewer?
less than 50%.
Less than 50%, so. I'm glad the numbers work out that way, that with less than 50%, it's still not a huge increase. But
And unfortunately, I think because of the age of the city and where the sewers are, it's a disproportionately large percentage of less affluent people.
Yeah, it's the landlords who pay the brunt of this.
Yeah.
And that's passed on to rents.
yeah, it's fast on, sure. Well, thank you.
Absolutely. And the cost of, if you have a septic in your backyard, if you have a well in the front yard like I do, those don't last forever. When it's time to replace those, that's a big bill. So you pay one way or the other.
I paid $25,000 to replace my septic system last year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that day, so. But I did replace the well up front of the pump up front, that was 5,000.
How much was
25.
it? That's kind of average, is it, these days?
Lovely, lovely. All right, David, thank you for that presentation. Ward, did you want to add anything or? Is that okay?
No, I
That's
think
fine.
Unless there are any other questions,
All right,
if
well-
there are any questions, or if you take time to review it, you do have a question, please feel free to reach out to me. We can connect with Dave and or
Absolutely.
anybody on his team, if there's any other additional questions that come forward.
Appreciate
All
it.
right, well, congratulations to the finance and the auditing department here. Job well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll move on to the community assisted rate collections update, and that is Ruth Swift. Good evening, Ruth.
So we usually go over the end of the moratorium in April, so this is kind of like a midway point for us here. Just to kind of go over the collections process, the impact that we have with the community assistance rate, and where we kind of landed after the pandemic and the different efforts that we made during that time. So the collections process, we mail out the statements. If they get paid, we mail out the next statement. Termination letter is mailed. We make automated collection calls. And the service gets terminated if they still don't pay at that point. The termination, of course, is always our last option. We do not want to shut anybody off. We'd rather have the money come in. We do attempt many options to get the bills paid, payment arrangements, referring to agencies. We have TVCCA in our office. We have one of our representatives, Kiana, does the Operation Fuel applications. So there's a lot of opportunities to get assistance right in our office. Once they've been terminated for non-payment, we do require the payment in full for services to be restored. However, a lot of the customers, especially at the end of the moratorium, will have very large bills. So we do try to take into consideration the circumstances around it and make some arrangements for that. And during the moratorium, from November 1st to May 1st, hardship customers do not get terminated for non-payment. Hopefully they make payments so that it's not so bad at the end of the moratorium, but they are exempt at that point. Our community assistance rate, we put that into place in November. We were the first utility to get that up and running. We anticipated about 20% of the customer base would be able to take advantage of the 10% reduction in the bill. We currently have a little more than 1,800 customers enrolled, so that was, a considerable amount since November that's in there. 136 of those customers are also enrolled in auto pay for the additional 10% discount. And since we started in November, we have had 9 customers that have lost the auto pay discount or not. They've been removed from auto pay, but they're still getting the 10% community assistance rate.
The number of 1,800 is right on par with what we predicted in advance. The number of people who got on auto pay is significantly more than we were
Yes,
expecting.
definitely. So as you can see from my charts here, the savings just until the end of January were about $54,000 altogether. So the customers on the low income rate saved a little more than $47,000. The customers that are on the low income rate and auto pay saved another $6,600 on top of that. So it's been very successful for these customers. So we also have medical notes that customers have. If there's serious illness, it covers them for the moratorium. The doctor signs that it's life-threatening, it's a year-round protection. In April of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, we had $4.4 million in medical notes. June of last year, we had about $6.5 million. So that was, coming out of the pandemic, it was increased considerably. We did write off 4.6 million June 30th for the fiscal year. And we currently have about 2.7 million in medical note debt right now. I have a graph for our balances that were over 31 days. This goes back to, pre-pandemic, so you can see the difference in where we were 2019 before we had any pandemic impact. Then it, increased significantly. And then January is lowered due to the write-offs that we did for the medical notes. So we're probably on par with where we were before 2019. So it is improving. Our medical notes are, still a big chunk of that, but our customers, I think, are in a better place now than they were during the pandemic. So I think we are improving.
So the medical note prevents you from terminating, so that's just putting you off. You're not
absolved from the debt.
absolving your debt.
Correct.
But with that medical note, maybe other factors you decide at that point, you're usually never going to collect, so we might as well write it off at that point.
Yes, we do have an attorney that works on collecting the medical debt. We've got judgments on quite a few of them, so they win the lottery, we might get some money. But at that point, we do write it off as uncollectible, and we can always accept the money afterwards if money comes in.
Okay.
So when you look at how this compounds, they don't pay their bill, and as soon as they get their medical notes, and then that's all penalized at 18%. That, the penalties get more than the actual utility bills pretty darn quick.
All right. Well, when you write that up, put their balance back to zero, or they're still on the hook for it, we just aren't showing it on the books anymore.
We write that off once we get judgment from the attorney, and when we send it to the attorney, we basically have to start them a new account so that anything $5,000 or more is what we send to the attorney.
Okay.
So if they hit that 5,000 mark and we send it off, we start them a new account with a zero balance, hoping that they'll start making monthly payments on that.
Right.
you know, if you open up a bill that says $25,000.
That's like, why bother?
Exactly, so, we have had in the past, some people actually start paying, but not many, unfortunately. So, once the attorney gets judgment on it, we do the write-off on the account that we had closed out, and we have judgment, we hope.
Do you get better luck getting payments from landlords, so people are renting and they're not paying the rent or whatever, they're just gonna send the bill to the landlord, he's gonna pay the bill, or? they want it for the
Not
same
gas and
situation?
electric, not gas and electric. So if they have tenants in there, the gas and electric is in the tenant's name, so the landlord is not on the hook for that.
Okay, that's true, yeah, that's how we did it. Yeah. Okay, or I'm sorry, I stopped.
Yeah, that's okay. So during the pandemic, we made concessions for a lot of our customers. Our commercial customers, we did have an increase in the balances. Even though it was only 30 customers that were having issues, it was still a lot of money. So pre-pandemic, we had about 6 customers that, you know, small commercial, would need to make some payment arrangements to catch up. June of 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic, we had considerable amounts of money owed on the 30 commercial customers. February of this year, we're down to about 5 customers and 213,000, and 1 commercial customer in particular owns the majority of that.
And that'll be done this summer.
Yes, yeah,
You'll have
July,
everything
that should be done by
repaid.
July.
So when we talk about commercial customers, are they, you know, small operations? Are there any big operations?
Yes, it's both.
Yeah. Okay.
So the 30 customers that were struggling were both large and small.
But the biggest one is one that we talked about in executive session, and it's somebody who had essentially all the businesses they served during the pandemic closed.
Yeah.
So it was serving an entertainment business, so a service industry for that.
Yeah, yeah.
So you might even be able to figure that one out pretty easily.
So for our residential customers, we made accommodations during the pandemic as well. We had modified our special payment arrangements so that the first 2 months that they were on, they were only paying their current bill, not anything on the past due. And then we also spread out the balance over 2 years at that point, rather than 12 months or less to get them caught up. We also, they have 0 penalties when they make that arrangement with us. So they avoided about $1.2 million in penalties during that time frame. We also reduced penalties for accounts that were not on agreements, saving the customers about $390,000 during the pandemic for that. And we also did no terminations for non-payment during that time period. So
we're going to look at the community impact beyond the regular stuff, the economic portions of it, taxes and all that sort of stuff. These calculations will be a big part of it.
And we look at commercial accounts every Wednesday morning. We have a team that looks at that. And we used to spend a lot of hours each week on this. This year, we have a fantastic collections team. And by having consistent rules and consistent follow through, we often have weeks where there's very little to talk about. So the team has done an outstanding job of managing this, and we don't have any real large accounts in arrears anymore.
Yeah, I think this is a good thing, and helping out businesses or individuals that have legitimate problems is a great thing. Do we ever contest things? I mean, where an overly aggressive business, for example, decides that they're gonna take advantage of this, but not really have a need, or, you know, that sort of thing.
no, we don't. I don't think we question, you know, most of them, I think it's obvious, like the business that relied on the entertainment industry, it was obvious that they weren't going to be able to make payment.
And they've made good on every payment arrangement since business had returned. So it's a huge success story. And if we were to take a hard line look at them, they may not be in business today.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the kind of hard line I'm talking about. I'm talking
Oh, I
about,
know what you mean. People abuse
Yes.
the system. And we've been so consistent with our team that we haven't had any issues of anyone abusing it for many years.
Thank you.
All right, very well. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you.
And we're gonna be talking to the New London Day on Thursday about this. Claire said can't be here tonight, she's at the FA thing. So we're gonna provide an abbreviated version of this presentation to her, and she understands we've got a great story to tell. And I think we can have bigger numbers in terms of what customers have stayed, we can share with her, and we'd expect to see a positive story in the paper over the weekend.
Didn't I see in the news that just recently that Eversource is proposing something like this? And I don't know if they're going to the,
Theirs took effect January 1st, I believe, but I haven't seen anything public, and we've been advertising like crazy.
yeah.
All right, well, moving on, next we have a regional electric rate comparison with Mr. Cinco. Hello, Stephen.
Thank you, Stu.
Do you want?
Billy, if you, it's only 3
I'll-
slides.
I'll-
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
Yep.
Okay, I think you've seen an article floating around on email, some of you have, that, on February 15th, Eversource filed with Pure for a rate increase effective, May 1st, 2024. It's intended to be implemented through the federally mandated congestion charge on a, Eversource bill. And I think those of you who go to CEMEC are familiar, the CIP meetings are familiar with that. So it's not through their PPA or generation costs recovery, and it's not through their base rates through the FMCC. They're reporting that the average monthly residential bill impact is going to be $38. And that's about 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's pretty high. And it's going to be a 19% increase. And they've attributed it to an increase due to state policy changes in the past few years, the largest being the deal that was made with Millstone over minimum rates, and really how they're able to recover those costs from customers and the timing of it, and things like that. And that's about $600 million of rate increase.
And we in CMEC are not part of that, right?
We are not part of that. However, we are monitoring everything and make sure that anything that does come up in here, that it doesn't affect us. Luckily, we stay out of that. And also, Ruth was just mentioning COVID shutoffs and things like that. State moratorium on shutoffs for unpaid bills for low income and medical hardship customers. So this is from like the start of COVID to May of 2023. They weren't allowed to shut off any customers that were in those categories that weren't paying their bill. That's about $160 million that they want to recover from customers. Next, please.
Stephen, why would something that was put into place in 2019 with Millstone show up this year as an additional cost?
It has to do with the rates that were set with Millstone, how they're able to recover those rates, and how they were able to calculate what that recovery was. So long story short, what Eversource wanted to do is sort of like we do with our PPA. We look at history and we do a forecast forward, and we try to set a PPA rate that will allow us to recover past costs as well as going forward costs. What Pura came back with is, no, you're not looking forward. You're looking at last year, and that's all we're going to allow you to include in recovery. So they did that. So they've been going along, and it's over years. It's built up to now they're like, hey, over $600 million we have to recover. We have to do something about this now because it's our bank account, basically.
So they weren't allowed to get it high enough to be caught up, now they're behind.
Yes, there's a lot more details behind the rate case. In other words, they're suggesting better ways of managing going forward. But Pure has to approve all that, so it's going to be a process. Looking at historical competitiveness between MPU and the investor-owned utility, who we know that's Eversource. Over the last 18 months, we've consistently been in a very good place, competitive. Compared to Eversource. Eversource are the red bars on a monthly basis for average residential bill. MPU is the blue. And currently we're running around 19% below customer to customer for an average electric bill.
And that's before the 19% gets tacked on.
Correct. Next. So we did take a look at that. Competitiveness from the standpoint of, hey, going forward, they're talking about this increase. So on the far right column, That's what they're proposing, going from roughly 29 cents per kilowatt hour on an average customer basis up to around 34.5 cents. This is effective, May 1st, if it goes through as planned. We would be staying the same. And we'd be about 12 cents a kilowatt hour lower than them on May 1st if everything plays out the way they planned, or 34% lower. That's if everything's approved as planned. Now, there's a long, laborious process to get there, and I'm sure that they're not going to get everything that they're asking for, but that's what could potentially happen. So, with all this being said, we're continuing to be very competitive with Eversource for the foreseeable future. And when we did raise the base rate in November, it was 3% increase. However, we lowered the PPA, so the average electric only, because we realized that almost a 10% decrease in their electric bill in November. And of course, along with that is we approved rate track going forward. So November 1st, we will have another 3% increase take effect. However, we're still going to remain extremely competitive with Eversource. This is aside from an energy cost variations, which is going to affect all of us ultimately. But that's sort of where we are. Next slide, please. So we're going to continue to look at this like we always do, the competitive analysis on a monthly basis. Anything that comes up, we'll point out to the board. And we're going to continue to monitor the rate increase proceedings and adjust any of our analytical models as necessary, because who knows what could happen, but we want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on that. And also, the last thing is, if anything else comes out in this rate hearing, we want to keep in contact with CMEC to make sure that if they do bring up any causes, that it doesn't impact us in any way, shape, or form. So we are. Any questions?
So right now, before their increase, we're 19% cheaper on electricity.
Correct.
That's quite a big difference.
It's huge. Yeah.
And it's gonna be 38% after their increase.
It's going to be, what is it? 34.
So to me, if we're operating at a slight deficit, but we're so much lower than Eversource, I don't know how we are compared to Groton Utilities or those folks. Is there a little room to just get us to where we can at least break even and have a little profit? Can we, or do you think this loss is just due to an aberration where we had some unexpected costs and they're not expected to recur? I don't really, know what happened, but.
So we like to put the return into the cost of service, and that cost of service is our predictions for the next 2 years. Now, we're already, 1 year in on the first rate increase.
So our rates are cost-based. We go through the whole cost of service study. It's all based on cost. So, and we work a 5 to 8% return on investment.
Maybe the return isn't big enough because we're not, covering the city payment.
We have actually put in the maximum return allowed by law, which is 8% on plan.
Well, that's different. That's a maximum.
We can max it out.
So what else can we do?
I anticipate when we get to the next cost of service, we'll see a change in the forecast of expenses.
So in other words, we have a larger cost to build off of, in other words?
Yeah, and as we
Okay.
continue to go through cost of service, you're always moving towards cost of service. You're always kind of chasing your tail because you're looking at history and then forecasting what we're going to do. Then you see your actual performance, see where you performed against that, and then you continue to move forward.
And I forget what the numbers are, but let's say they're saying that we really should have a 6% overtime. Well, do you want sticker shock with customers, or do you want to move them towards that over time? It's a balance.
Is that 8% just for electricity, or is that for other utilities too?
Gas and electric under state statute is 5
Gas
to
and
8%.
electric,
Yes.
but not sewer and water.
No, but we also use those numbers in sewer and water.
We do.
We do.
So if we look at electric, you're going to see a budget next week that's got a lot more investment in the electrical infrastructure for 2 reasons. One, it's been a long time since we've made major improvements to our system, and they're much needed. And the second is electrification is coming, and we need to start getting excess capacity in our system, or at least the ability to create that excess capacity.
You talking about electric cars when you say
Electric cars and electric heating with the chip units like we just installed, Mike.
Okay, yes.
So we haven't really seen that in Norwich. When we talk about electric vehicles, we are, at the 1% level. The state's at 6, but we're talking about potentially in 35 being 100%. So when you start looking at that 100%, and that will probably get pushed out.
Yeah.
But when we start getting out there, we're talking about doubling and tripling the load in our system. That's very significant, and we've got to start doing those investments to make sure we're prepared. We don't want to do them all at once, but we need to be sure we're prepared to get them. And that's gonna increase the cost of electric, and that cost of service will rise as we start doing more capital.
So that'll help us get a little bit better.
Yes,
Bottom line.
yeah, but it's all about reliability, sustainability, and making sure we're here for the future.
So Steve, I have a little bit different view of question here. When we did the November rate increase, we assumed a lower PPA that was going to make the total rate lower than that would more than offset the increase in our costs.
Yes.
But from what I've read, the cost of electricity and cost of natural gas that generates a lot of the electricity have gone down further than people expected. They've gone down further than we were looking at in the fall when we were setting our rates. So I guess the question is, do we further reduce the bills for people when the PPA goes down? Or do we maintain that amount, but retain, and then retain some of the balance, the difference between the two?
So a little of both, we maintain it, because when we set that purchase power adjustment, purchase gas adjustment, we're also looking at a forecast.
Yeah.
So while some of these prices are a surprise to people, they're not far off from what our forecast was back then, because, and like I said, if you're just looking behind and not looking forward when you're setting these, you might come in for a big surprise. So as we look at it every month, we analyze it every month, we look at what our recovery is, we constantly look at the markets going forward, where we are relative to that, where our targets are. And when we get up to our target is, then we'll come back to the board and say, hey, you know what? Cost maybe went down lower than we expected. We can make an adjustment now.
So like, I think, I have no idea, I could be wrong, but I think that if our actual PPA dropped below our forecasted PPA, that we ought to continue on with the forecasted PPA and put the balance in a rate stabilization fund. Now, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but.
We essentially do that.
Okay.
We maintain, what is it?
6 months.
700 million?
It's 3 million each. It's 3 months each in both rate stabilization fund and
Yeah, okay.
PPA.
Yeah, so we've essentially maintained that rate stabilization fund at CMEC that we know about, but then we also sort of maintain one here that's in the millions of dollars, and that's our target. So what happens is maybe we were under recovered before we went into this, and then even if costs go down and we lower our PPA, we can still maybe approach that goal, and when we get there, we'll look at it again. But if we're going to make an adjustment, we will also look out 3 years and really use about 18 months of market to really set that number, if that makes sense.
And we're using CMEC numbers and also our indexes that we get from futures.
Yeah. And we get updated 5-year forecasts from CMEC every single month. And we reconcile that back to where our forecast was, to see if we're over and under.
I mean, the dynamics with gas are interesting because, I mean, for example, Chesapeake, which is a big producer of natural gas, just announced a big cutback in terms of its capital investment and a 15% reduction in the amount of natural gas it was going to produce. The reason being the price is so low.
Exactly.
So, I mean, if you're in that business, the good thing about natural gas is that it stays in the ground, and when prices go up, you just take it out.
Exactly. And what we've heard is producers don't like really low prices, obviously. They also don't like very high prices.
Yeah.
They would like something like that just sort of stays down.
Yeah.
Then you can set up all your wells and just keep producing.
Well, I guess my point is, it's at least conceivable there's going to be a cutback in the amount of natural gas that's being produced in the next few years, which will result in an increase in cost of natural gas, which will increase our PPA, so we need a rate stabilization resource.
And we can go over that at some point in the future, maybe a little bit more detail. If you want to set something up.
Yeah.
Maybe next time we
have a
have.
busy meeting next month, maybe in 2 months, that'd be a good presentation.
Sure.
Because with the full budget next month, that's a lot to digest.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Stephen. All right, and with that, that brings us to agenda item 6, which is executive session. Chris, who would you like to stay behind?
All right, well, let's put it this way, who in this room can, online, like Jeff to stay on? And, Laura and Ruth can both, go home? You're gonna help us, with the presentations and the video, so.
All right, so it is my duty to inform that this executive session is to discuss confidential trade secret and commercially valuable confidential or proprietary information not subject to inspection or public disclosure according to section 12105 and 723A of the Connecticut General Statutes. And also this information is commercially valuable, confidential, and proprietary that's subject to public disclosure pursuant to Public Act 98-212, and to discuss personnel matters of an employee or ease and or public official pursuant to Chapter 14, Section 1206A of the Connecticut General Statutes. And with that, we're in executive session.
Right, I think we still have a couple people on who